everyone, it's Holmes from Homestorybooks, and today I'm here to give you recommendations. Specifically, I'm here to give book recommendations to my friend Jenny, who is a Chinese-Australian junior doctor. She literally has no time to read. She's either studying, working, or spending time with her family, so if I recommend a book for her, it has to be incredible. I thought I'd make a video in case any of these books interest you as well. Jenny's stipulations for books are as follows: a strong story, a strong female protagonist, and a protagonist who's not white. It shouldn't be that hard because those books are out there, but marketing is what it is, and so one has to look very carefully among the shelves to find them. That said, let's get into the books, including the very first book I recommended to her. The first book I recommended to Jenny was A Concise Chinese-English Dictionary for Lovers by Xiaolu Guo. This is about a young woman called Zadie who wants to improve her English when she moves to London, so she keeps a diary. As her English improves, the writing in the diary improves, which demonstrates Xiaolu Guo's incredible craft. The characters are complex and believable. There are so many great moments where Xiaolu uses dry humor to tell deadpan jokes about British culture, which I adored. Zadie, at first adrift in a foreign country, begins to find her footing and then herself. Jenny read the first chapter and said the main character's voice reminded her of her mum and was gripped from then on. She read it in one sitting, which is like the greatest compliment ever. 5 stars from me and 5 stars from Jenny too. Jenny, if you liked A Concise Chinese-English Dictionary for Lovers, please read I Am China by Xiaolu Guo. I Am China is a story told through translated letters. Iona, a Scottish translator, receives a pile of letters between two lovers, Jian and Mu. Jian is an exiled Chinese musician, and where is Mu, his former girlfriend? Iona is determined to bring them together to discover the truth and to untangle the threads that took them away from each other. Xiaolu Guo is somehow hopeful, cynical, witty, and romantic all at once. This story is told somewhat out of order as Iona translates the letters out of order, in the giant pile, just as she received them. I spent so much time in this book hungry for answers, wanting to read one more chapter, and then another, and then another. I loved that this book had a few little pictures and photographs of Jian's writing, that of an angry, drunken calligrapher. I loved the massive plot points and the tiny details all slowly unfurling like a blooming tea ball, petals uncurling to reveal a red center. I read this book all the way to the acknowledgements. I didn't want it to end. If I had to pick between A Concise Chinese-English Dictionary for Lovers and I Am China, I don't think I could. They feel like my children, and I love them both. 5 stars. The next book on this list is Crazy Rich Asians by Kwan. I know you've already seen and loved the movie, Jenny, but the book is also really great. Crazy Rich Asians is about Rachel Chu, who is a professor at a university. Her boyfriend, Nick, invites her to Singapore to be his date to his friend's wedding. Little does she know he's from one of Singapore's wealthiest families. I loved the visual spectacle of the film. I thought the film was great. There really isn't any comparison to make, but what I loved about the book was the flipping between English and Singapore English or Singlish, and then Cantonese and Mandarin and Malaysian. There were so many references to food and culture that might be missed or skipped over in the film, so I really do recommend reading this one as well. I gave this one 3 stars initially, but over time I really warmed up to it, and the film made me fall in love with it all over again, so 4 stars. But Jenny, I hear you. You don't have time. That's fine, that's cool. But have you read China Rich Girlfriend by Kwan, the second book in the Crazy Rich Asians series? This is one of the 2 books for this video that I haven't read in its entirety, but I already know I'm going to love it. It follows the continuing cast of characters, and Kwan just adds so much color and movement to every story. The footnotes in this book are full of snark and sass, and Kwan's voice feels like a character in and of itself. At the time of writing the script for this video, I am hold 81 in the queue to read this book from the library, so his books are popular and so easy to read. How could you resist? This next book is Out by Natsuo Kirino. It is a psychological thriller, and one might argue it is one of my favorite books of all time. It centers around 4 women who work at a bento box factory, one of whom murders her husband, and then the other 3 are caught up in the crime. The main character in this book, Masako, is one of my favorite characters of all time. Kirino writes her so incredibly well. Even as the main protagonist, she is mysterious, she is almost unknowable. So you keep reading to discover her motivations and her layers and her innermost thoughts. The atmosphere is heavy, heady, and incredible. The smell of deep-fried pork katsu curry and gravy, the oppressive heat of a Japanese summer, but most of all, the creeping crawl, the dread of someone following you, of a life not lived, of all the happiness you might have had. This book is feminist vigilante justice. This book is raw anger, and it rolls in like a typhoon. 5 stars. Ugh, it's so good. Oh my god. Another 5-star read, only the best for you, Jenny, is Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This book is about Dana, a black woman in the 1970s who travels back in time unwillingly to save the life of a white boy in the Deep South in the 1800s. She realizes her and this boy are linked and he is her ancestor. She keeps traveling back in time, often risking her own life to make sure her ancestral link is continued so her own timeline in the 1970s continues. Dana saves people's lives, she advocates for them, she teaches children of slaves to read and write and to think critically, but she must allow terrible atrocities to occur so that this ancestor can give birth to her own great-great-grandmother. This is a super gripping and compelling story. This book is visceral and raw and vulnerable, and it has such brilliant character formation. Her writing challenges me as a reader. I can hear her voice through all the plot and prose. Butler takes these historical atrocities and makes them a lived experience. Margaret Atwood who? Never heard of her. Butler's expertise knows no equal. 5 stars. The next book on this list of reading recommendations is Paper Teeth by Lauralyn Chow. It is a short story collection with a common thread, following a Chinese-Canadian family through their lives. I'm recommending this to you, Jenny, because it's a short story collection. You can pick it up and put it down and still follow the story because each story, while connected, is still self-contained. Food is an integral part of this novel. Many of the short story titles are the names of foods found in Chinese restaurants, so egg drop soup, dumplings, and spring rolls. All of these are so evocative and so recognizable. For many of us, I think food conjures up a special part of memory, of nostalgia. Food has the ability to make us sentimental in ways that no other thing can, and I think the author does that excellently in this book. There are references to dim sum, hagao, steamed whole fish with ginger and scallions, and barbecue duck that make me hungry and happy and wistful all at once. My dad was born in Australia, but his family lived in Shanghai and Hong Kong for a long time before that. So he grew up surrounded by Chinese food, speaking smatterings of Russian, English, and Cantonese with his siblings. I never learned Cantonese or Russian, but one of my earliest memories is eating fistfuls of rice as a baby, little white grains stuck to my face, surrounded by the smell of green onions and soy sauce. So that's what Lauralyn's writing does to you. It makes you remember. It makes you wax poetic about tofu puffs and sliced oranges, which for me is not really uncommon, but it happens a lot between her pages. It's all about identity and how the children of this family want to learn Mandarin and Cantonese because they want to know what their parents talk about amongst themselves. But they hate going to Chinese school on Saturday. It's sentimental and sweet and full of cultural clashes and blends, and the story where her daughter asks her mother about sex is literally my favorite thing. 4 stars. Another food-related book, Man by Kim Thuy. Kim Thuy is a Vietnamese Canadian. The majority of her books are written in French, and some are translated, some are not, which always makes me pine for her writing even more. This one is a little bit left of field. It's more of a wild card, but it's such a delicate, beautiful, easy read, you could read it in one sitting. Man is about a Vietnamese Canadian chef who is telling the story of her life through food. Thuy's prose is delicate, like folded paper cranes, like forehead kisses, like snowflakes melting in your palm. And everything I've read of Kim Thuy's really is spectacular. A lot like Xiaolu Guo, I can't pick favorites. I feel contented after reading her work. 4 stars. NW by Zadie Smith is my other wild card. It is a multiple perspective story about a specific neighborhood in London. Smith's writing is very singular. It tends to be described as Marmite writing, so writing you either really dislike or really like, which I think is a good thing for an author to be. I did like some of this novel more than others. Some of the parts that I enjoyed, I loved. Smith paints a London that is so wonderfully alive and messy and layered. Her writing is skillful and playful and unique and as diverse as London itself. 4 stars, and you might not like it, Jenny, but also you never know until you try. A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki is one that I read in a few sittings and adored immediately after I read it. Now some of the intricacies of the story have faded away, but I still think of it very affectionately. A woman named Ruth, who lives in BC, finds a Japanese Hello Kitty lunchbox on a beach, and therein lies a diary of a Japanese girl along with some old letters and an old watch. I was expecting this to be some hugely intellectual, sprawling story about Buddhism and the exploration of the self, because the author's name is Ruth as well, who also lives in BC, but it was so much more emotional and beautiful than I could have hoped for. The story really came alive at a certain point, and I couldn't put it down. I don't want to give away the plot because I think the real pleasure of reading this book for me came from Ozeki's ability to unwind the plot like a giant spool of really delicate thread. But this was so palatable for me, even the more dramatic bits that other reviewers say they struggle to read. I was really swept up in a story about grilled eel, a petulant 16-year-old in a Buddhist monastery, the old watch of a Japanese fighter pilot in World War II, the wild weather on an isolated island in British Columbia. This story had so much color and texture. It was really captivating, and I enjoyed it so much. 4 stars. The last book on this list is Pachinko by Jin Lee. This book is one I haven't finished, but I've read about 100 pages of it. It is a Korean historical fiction novel all about one family, told through the women of each generation of that family. Jin Lee prioritizes unheard voices in her novel, first following colonized Koreans in the 1900s, then following them to Japan, where they became the colonizers. We follow this family through wealth, poverty, war, and peace into crime dens and schoolhouses, where Lee, year after year, shows how the world continues to turn and Lady Fortune turns her wheel. Richly told, opulent in its details, and supremely moving. I'm totally going to pick this up and start reading it again because every time I see it after putting it down, I regret putting it down immensely. I loved the characters in this. They were so well developed, so flawed, so compelling to follow, so I can't wait to meet the characters again. That's it. That's all for this book list. I hope Jenny doesn't feel totally overwhelmed. Oh my god. Did you ever recommend a book to a friend and it turned out to be one of their favorite books? It's the best feeling. Let's chat in the comments below. Bye everyone.